All right, so let's call the order. 9:06. We good, Stephen?
Yeah, we're all good.
All right. And the Metro Vancouver Transit Police and the Police Board respects the Indigenous nations within Metro Vancouver and acknowledges all First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people for their continued resilience, sustainable stewardship, and as active members of the community for generations to come. We recognize that working within and managing the region's transportation system, we do have a role to play in supporting reconciliation with Indigenous people. I'd also like to recognize that today is the National Day of Remembrance for Victims of Terrorism. And the flags at Metro Vancouver Transit Police are at half-mast, as they are at government establishments across the country, to recognize the day and honor the victims lost to acts of terrorism. All right, welcome everybody. Nice to see you all. We'll move to the first item, which is consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they would like to pull from consent?
Next, I've got a comment on I.
Okay.
E,
E?
it's already to say aye.
Yeah. Anything else? Great. So can I have, the recommendation is that we receive the information, less E and I.
So moved.
Bill seconds, everybody's okay? Great, all right. So let's talk about E, Adam.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the report about police stops, the 2022 audit. It's a really good report, thank you. The numbers are really low, obviously it's zero, can't get much better than that. But so the 9 that were done that were recoded or reclassified, I guess were done by one officer. So then I understand why, I guess they runs a comma or something and came back. I'm just curious, like with that one officer, was there special training given or direction, or how did that play out?
Yeah, so they were then given training afterwards on about what the updated policy was, even like the coding of the file, a proper explanation. I wanted to make sure about if you are just doing a stop, what it requires and how it would be documented, and the fact that their stops weren't just random stops, they actually fit into a category, and then the proper way to score that within Prime system and to create the file. So because it was one person, it was easy to identify and rectify in that.
Sounds good. And then my second question was on your Intel GOs, have you seen the number of those go up as you're?
Yes, we've seen those go.
Questions about E? All right, great. How about I?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, it's more a comment than a question. It's in the infographic that's part of that public report. The ridership's gone up by 46%, and the crime rates appear to go up by a percentage amount as well. It's not clear whether the crime rates are related to the increased ridership or to absolute numbers. And then when I looked at it in more detail, I realized it's absolute numbers. If you looked at it on a per 100,000 boarding basis, they'd all be quite significantly lower than they were last year on a per 100,000. And in light of the fact that, and again, I'm going more from, I guess what I call innuendo than having surveyed the public. But the public seems to be concerned about transit not being a safe mode of transportation. And I'm thinking that maybe prudent to include both the increase in the absolute number of crimes, but also the relative rate of crime per 100,000 boardings, which would show a significant decrease based on what I surmise from the information. So it's more just that comment that to build confidence in the public, I think we need to be careful that we present the information in a way that reinforces that the system is a safe system. Notwithstanding the fact that we've had some crimes that have been, hit the front page of the paper, they're not the norm, they're very much the exception.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you say, there's two ways to look at it. One is the rate per 100,000 and then just the raw numbers, which some people ask and say, well, just is there been an increase in it? So we can present it in both ways. I can tell you that when we look at the assault rate, like we do it per 100,000 riders. So we average like about a 0.46%. So 0.46 of a person gets assaulted per 100,000 people. The assault rate in the province of BC is 7.6% per 1,000. Like that's the significant difference of what the numbers look like. So we are able to do that. And we recently presented stats like that at the Urban Transportation Institute, to the TransLink board yesterday. We gave numbers similar to that as well.
Well, I think that's, you know, in my mind, providing a base of reference against which they can compare the numbers, I think is a good idea. And sometimes year over year, we have changes that are negative. But in the context of the broader society, they're still positive.
Right. Yeah. Stephen's on it.
Yeah.
Great. All right, any other questions for I? Yeah.
Sure, just as a follow-up to that, I thought it was a really good report, and I think the adding of the video into it as well, and the way that the information is, you know, kind of displayed is very positive. Questions just around kind of proactive distribution, especially given the fact that so many new mayors, members of council since November, a lot of them really still don't fully understand transit police. And I think, you know, every day the organization is doing a good job of branding and so on, but I'm just wondering how, and maybe this is to Stephen, how it is distributed as opposed to people having to go to the website and looking at it. So,
Right. So immediately following this meeting, following approval or acceptance, is sent into the Ministry of Public Safety for filing. It's also then presented at the next TransLink board meeting to the TransLink board, and that's generally well covered by media. So that's a good way to get that information distributed as well. It's sent out to our Chiefs Community Council. I think one thing we may want to look at then would be with Mayor's Council, if there's an opportunity to utilize the TransLink government relations team to send it out to the Mayor's Council for awareness. I think that would be a really good distribution method that we could capitalize on. And then it's heavily promoted on social media.
and the jurisdictional partners as well.
And, oh, sorry, yes, and then the jurisdiction.
I just would suggest that there's such a turnover even in council members, just to send it to the mayors, that's one thing, but if each jurisdiction that transit police are involved in, if it was possible to send it to the mayor and council, just as a proactive way to hopefully raise awareness, because there's so many good pieces of information in this beyond what a lot of people make it. So I would hope that maybe you take a look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you look at the infographic as well, there's always opportunities to kind of selectively take out one or two stats periodically and kind of promote that on social media. So rather than kind of showcasing like 20 stats all at once, but it really kind of highlights some of the detail behind each of those.
Yeah, I have a comment. We have a mayor's forum in the Lower Mainland. It's held twice a year with all our mayors and CAOs, and every OIC or detachment commander is there. So it is a really good forum. It's well, we just had one probably about a month ago, and I can invite chief of police, and I can also invite someone to speak on behalf of what TransLink does, and just also showcase that we all work together for public safety. So if you're interested in that, because we do have a lot of new mayors and CAOs. And so what we're doing in the Lower Mainland, we're meeting each and every mayor and CAO and their team from a corporate client perspective, but also from an OIC perspective. So I will put that out there, and it's very, very informative. And our OIC sit with the mayors and CAOs, and it's we do info messaging as well. So if this is the way we would like to go, and support, I would love nothing more than to have some teams from transit police go and we would slot you in for a presentation. Because it's not just the mayors and the CEOs that may not truly appreciate what the transit police does. We also need to educate our OICs. And so because climb those boundaries and remaining proactive. So I offer that for the table.
Be well received.
Okay.
Any opportunity we can, I think next week I'll be in the city of Burnaby.
Right.
Again, with their community crime prevention
Yeah.
committee, which is basically council, having a talk again. And again, what we're doing with Burnaby, how we're working together. So it's we welcome these opportunities to get in front of everyone from the OICs to politicians to community groups.
Yes. And I know Dave presented when I first got back from Baghdad, I believe, to all the DMT and was extremely well received. So let's just notch it up a bit and go from there.
I think one other channel I'll just offer up just to also answer George's question is just in terms of media coverage, like our media coverage this year, I believe by the halfway point of the year, we've already had more media coverage than all of 2022. A lot of that has to do with that really focus on safety of the transit system, and 2022 was 50% higher than 2021. So generally, following the completion of this report, we pull up like a really huge poster in Amanda's office, and we're really trying to get that information out to media and as many different, every opportunity when they're phoning us and they're asking about crime statistics, we're constantly kind of pushing this information out and using that as an opportunity to inform the public using a variety of media outlets.
Thank you. Just following up on Murray's comment, I agree with Murray, like it is important to have the crime rate as well. But I think it's important to have both numbers because otherwise you have no context. Like when you're talking about per 100,000 riders, does that mean that we had, 100 assaults, we had 10,000 assaults? Like we need the raw numbers as well, but also the rate per ridership. I think it's helpful to have both.
Yeah,
Just by the context.
Sure.
Just following up on that, thank you. Just following up on the crime rate, it may be helpful also to have a crime rate based on other transit jurisdictions. That might be helpful, maybe internally. But my comment was that I certainly want to compliment the team on the excellent annual report. I really like the video. It allows broader groups. I would certainly encourage you to continue that. And I like the graphics that you've done on the dashboard. So just want to say kudos to the team.
I was gonna say, when we talk about just interest of what we had, TransLink held their AGM yesterday and then an open board meeting. As part of it, they do Slido open questions on the, to the AGM portion of it. And out of all the questions asked, there wasn't one else. Right, concern, there were a lot, like when they were talking how they label concerns, I mean, people were more concerned about some of the removal of services or how the services and stuff like that. TransLink's very responsive to it. And I'm certain because I would just quickly scroll it here as to how it is, and they can be made anonymous as part of the survey as well. So to me, it's one of those, kind of subjective measures, like here we are, we're presenting at it. And when the list of questions come in, anything to touch on safety.
Is this report out publicly now?
It is on our website as part of the public package, but it hasn't been actually added to the report to the community webpage. So that's added following this meeting.
And you guys will throw like social media links to all that? Awesome. It's great. It looks really good.
Any other comments? All right, can I get a motion to approve E and I, please, from the consent? Adam seconds. Good. Thank you very much. All right, public delegations, are there any? All right, so on to chief officer report.
So this section here, I'll turn the operations side over to Inspector Dexter Hubert.
Good morning, everybody. I'll be providing the update on the patrol section. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge all the hard work that's being done by the frontline members. I think it's always important to remember them and the NCOs that are supporting them. So, without them, we wouldn't accomplish, right? So, but I'd also like to thank Amanda because, he's done a great job with all the media releases, and the members on patrol actually enjoy reading them and knowing that we're in a spotlight on some, but it's really important for them as well. So since April, we had 4 block JIBC recruits working with their respective trainers on B&D squads. We're looking forward to the 4 recruits that are graduating on July 7th. And this will help with the resources on patrol. So really looking forward to that. In early June, we also had 2 contract members from Vancouver Police joined us after retiring, and they're on A and C squad, so day shift, and they're doing a fantastic job. In May, on May 4th and 8th, we held our 2 supervisor NCO training days, which also incorporated invitations and participation from TransLink operating companies. There were great discussions, information sharing, teamwork, networking, and participations. We held 2 tabletop exercises each morning, focused on the transit system, followed by high visibility checks on the system in the afternoon, working with our TransLink partners. I got some great feedback back from them. They loved it. It was an excellent opportunity to to meet others, even just connecting BCRTC with ProTrans staff because they don't see each other's job. Planning for Canada Day celebration is underway, with events being organized in Vancouver, Burnaby, Patterson SkyTrain Station, all the way up to Metrotown, Coquitlam, Lafarge, Port Moody, Richmond, North Vancouver. So Sergeant Julian Ponchin, our operational planning SEO, doing a fantastic job. Without him, we'd be struggling just to get it off the ground. Just an update on World Cup 2026 FIBA. Everybody's aware it's coming. Coming to Vancouver and Toronto, so it should run approximately for 40 days, starting in June, ending sometime in July. I believe the end date could be July 19th for the final. Vancouver, as we know, will probably be hosting about 5 to 6 games, with Toronto the same. But we have a bigger stadium than Toronto. Yes, Toronto has grass. We have no grass, so Vancouver has some work to do. But we had a national coordination group meeting this week, June 20th and 21st at Vancouver, held by Vancouver, with Public Safety Canada, Toronto, Province of BC, CBSA, just to see how the coordination will work and what work still has to be done. There's still lots of work to be done to make this happen. Internally at TransLink, we also have a committee, a group working. TransLink, Mark Langley, he's responsible for that. And we'll be pulling in people from BCRTC, ProTrans, and Coast Mountain Bus Company to make this happen, and one of us as well. So over the last 2 months, TransPolice has been very, very busy, visible on the transit system, conducting extensive and increase in high visibility patrols, enforcement, and community safety initiatives with our partners as well. I want to update on some files of note for patrol. File with a person with a gun. So TransPolice received a call from a SkyTrain attendant advising there was a person with a gun at the Gateway Station in Surrey. The male was not threatening anyone, but was showing the gun to another male and then put it in his waistband. Surrey RCMP and TransPolice attended, and all trains were held in place. The male was taken into custody on the platform, and the knife was located in the shape of a gun. The male was on bail out of Prince George on 7 firearms-related charges, and he had conditions not to possess a knife or be outside of his recovery. Another file is a Canada-wide warrant. Members were working on foot and in around Surrey SkyTrain Station. Officers recognized the male from one of the crime bulletins. The male stood out as he had facial tattoos. This male was checked and was found to be in breach of his parole. Corrections Services Canada was contacted and they confirmed the breach and immediately revoked his parole, triggered a Canada-wide warrant, and he was arrested and transported to Surrey RCMP cells. Another one was an assault on a bus operator. This happened out in Richmond, number 5 road. A passenger boarded a bus through the rear doors. The driver operator told him not to board through the rear doors. Soon after, the passengers walked up to the operator's seat. The operator told the passenger to sit down. The passenger pulled out a box cutter style knife with the blade extended and held it to his face. The bus driver pulled over. Male exited the bus, and the suspect was located by the Richmond RCMP and turned over to us. He was arrested for assault, and victim service and safety plan was provided to the bus operator. One more for patrol, found missing autistic child. SkyTrain attendant at Metrotown Station alerted TransPolice that a 6-year-old child was at the station alone, which is frightening by itself. TransPolice arrived to observe the child having a tantrum and the SkyTrain attendant having difficult time controlling the child. The child was identified as autistic and was attempting to hit, scrape, and bite both officers and grabbing the other duty belts. The officers were able to safely reunite the child with the mother. The next update I'll provide is on to the operational support section, as Inspector Bruce Hamilton is unable to join us today. The first one will be on the explosive detection dogs. So during this reporting period, 6 dog handlers and their canine partners attended the Pacific Northwest Canine Conference in Washington. Attendees liaised and built relationships with other handlers from Washington State, Oregon, Montana, and Idaho, as well as instructors from NYPD, FBI, ATF, and Washington State. Our handlers had the opportunity to imprint on very volatile homemade explosives at large heights and variety of environments. There was a 2-day hands-on training session for K9 first aid. As a result of the relationships, Gordon McGinn is really good at building those relationships. At the conference, our team has been invited to attend Seattle, Washington for a training day with the ATF. I believe the RCMP attended as well, so it was a great working relationship with them as well. The K9 unit continues to have a significant presence on the transit system while conducting their daily sweep, so thereby are augmenting patrol visibility on the transit system. Just a quick update on our CSO program. Thank you to recruiting, really pushing that through. After a successful recruiting campaign, 11 candidates were identified for the first community safety officer training class, which will start on June 26th. We're so excited for this. For a 10-week program, and the CSO recruits will then have an 8-week period of field training before training is completed. Almost the last one, Target Mobile Enforcement Team. Over the reporting period, TMET has conducted joint force operations initiatives with UBC RCMP, West Vancouver Police, Burnaby RCMP, BC Highway Patrol, City of Coquitlam bylaw, Westminster bylaw, and the Vancouver Police and ICBC. In April, TMET, small section, issued 220 bylaw tickets and 142 violation tickets. During the month of May, they stepped it up. An enforcement on the SkyTrain and support of department-wide initiative for increased visibility that we had. TMET conducted 38 initiatives, which resulted in 509 bylaw tickets and 263 violation tickets. TMET is also responsible for training all our new hires that come on board, for example, laterals, contracts, or new recruits. They go through TMET for 1 week to learn about the tariff and the fair inspection app and so on. Great team. Over to the OCC. In response to staffing challenges in the OCC, development is underway for an in-house OCC operator dispatcher training program. The training program is expected to be 6 months in duration, and at the conclusion, the operators will be trained, the call taker, information operator, and dispatcher. This concludes my update. Are there any questions before I hand it over to Inspector Law?
I have a comment. Yes. So the musical ride is in town, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, 2 days in Surrey, 1 day in Burnaby. So there's should be hopefully increased traffic on the transit system. And it's celebrating Canada's RCMP's 150-year anniversary. So if anyone's interested in going, just let me know. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you for your report. On the top of visibility, are we continuing the visibility and at what level? If we're continuing the visibility?
We are still highly visible on the system. The members of the watch commanders identifying locations are still attending, but it's been scaled back a little bit.
Thank you.
Hurry.
Yeah, thank you. Good report. Just in the context of the patrols that you mentioned in the report, are those related to having extra funding available to us to conduct additional patrols to enhance customers' perceptions of safety on the system? Or are those just done within regular budget hours?
These were all done within regular budget hours.
So the additional funding that I understood was made available by the province to us for enhancing system safety, how are those hours being used?
So we made a submission on it, so we're still, and it all looks favorable, but it was a brand new program of the province, so they're working its way through signatures and then the release of the
We
funding.
haven't seen the money yet.
We haven't seen the money yet, but we haven't seen it, but everything looks favorable. And again, as Dex has mentioned, Sergeant Julian Poncion, has been asked for some, I would say, feedback or additional information, which all leans towards it's just getting everything right. The original request was going to go from when we initially asked till the end of September, probably now what we discussed with them right till the end of the year. So
Thank you.
The program didn't open until May, it's here from May 9th. Just to take a couple weeks just to get it all sorted out on their end, and then hopefully within the next week or two, we'll get.
The context of demonstrating a reactivity to public concern is often a concern of mine, that we announce something and then it takes 3 months before anything really happens, which kind of sometimes undermines the principle that it's trying to be addressed through the additional funding. So,
Great news about the CSO program too, 11 going in, starting Monday. That's great. It's really great.
Bryce has been able to sleep now.
Yeah.
There was no pressure on him.
Well done. No, that's a great effort. All right, any other questions? Is it more to them? Somebody else?
Sorry, you were passing, are you concluded, Chris?
Okay.
Okay.
For me, good morning, everyone. Just an update on an investigation last July 27th. It's a double fatal motor vehicle accident. With the assistance of Burnaby RCP detachment and our LMD traffic reconstructionist, we've now put together and completed a comprehensive disclosure package on that investigation. I went to Crown Counsel yesterday for assessments, but it's been tracking along very well. Starting off with or carrying on with General Investigations Unit on April 10th, we had a stabbing occur at the Columbia SkyTrain Station. NW Police Department or New West Police Department took conduct of the investigation, but Transit assigned investigators to assist with the drafting of search warrants for 2 residences associated with the suspects. They've since been arrested and charges have been approved, and both remain in custody at this point. The following day in Surrey on April the 11th, this was widely reported in the media. We had a stabbing that later that proved to be fatal on one individual. And again, just kudos to all the transit members that were able to assist ICAT and the Surrey RCMP detachment with that investigation throughout and getting them what they needed to have charges approved in that case. On April 15th, we had another stabbing occur at the Surrey Central SkyTrain Station. Multiple transit and Surrey officers attended the scene and located the victim and his girlfriend. The victim had a large stab wound to his abdomen. Was taken RCH. He's recovering, and we've identified suspects in that investigation, and charges have been recommended to Crown Counsel. Also, just note on April 27th, we received a request from the New West PD in relation to an ongoing kidnapping investigation they had underway. So we were able to provide assistance in the form of trained negotiators and our crime suppression team. We worked with New West throughout the day, and ultimately that led to the successful apprehension of 2 suspects and recovery of the hostage, and just being present during the investigation as it was unfolding. Kudos to CFSU and the LMD district DRT team who managed to locate our victim and bring that to a successful resolution. So that was interesting. And just again, in the way of update as far as GIU files go, this is going back a ways, December 4th, 2021, where an individual was stabbed 9 times on a SkyTrain. The suspect in that case has, as of last week, pled guilty to all charges. So again, kudos to the General Investigation Unit for the comprehensive disclosure package that went in that resulted in that guilty plea. Over to the crime suppression team. On May 25th, they worked with the Surrey RCMP and Delta Police in the Guildford area on a boost and bust that resulted in 15 arrests and 15 Port to Crown Councils that were forwarded for various charges. They also took conduct of an assault on one of our police officers that occurred at the Sperling Station in Burnaby, where the suspect actually slashed at one of our officers with a knife, and which resulted in quite a gash in her clothing. As that suspect was arrested by patrol members on scene, and was later taken to RCH where psych assessment was done, certified, released, and charges of assault have been approved against that suspect.
You'll see CST in the closed meeting, given a update on Project Bedlam. With respect to our criminal intelligence unit, they were able to identify 48 suspects through various video analysis and distribution of suspect ID photographs, and CIU and Staff Sergeant Meaden attended 2 violent offender hub meetings since the last board meeting, an attempt to work with Crown Council identifying violent offenders that meet the threshold of targeting. We've made 2 submissions. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Good
morning, everyone.
Good morning. It's already Suzanne now.
I'll give the updates for the administrative services division. So 2 updates on finance and just recognition for members in our finance division. They're still working through the ERP, that's the enterprise resource planning process. Lots of work with that, but we're starting to move more smoothly through it. And thanks to TransLink as well for their support through that process. Secondly, just in terms of case submissions, so for 2023 capital projects, all of those have been provided and approved by TransLink, and we're into the 2024 budget planning is underway for our team. In human resources, the employee morale survey was launched on June 19th, and we expect those results to be available in the fall of 2023. And lots of work by HR in terms of exempt job reviews. They've done 8 total to date, and they've streamlined those positions to, in terms of funding with our TransLink similar positions. So good work on there and in that. Just talking about the new sergeant member development and support positions. So we continue to work on supporting our JIBC recruits, developing our CISM program, as well as reintegration. And we recently held a 3-day multi-agency workshop, and we have 8 new team members on our CISM team. So that brings up our total to 23 active members, and that's both sworn and civilian personnel. So great increases there. In IT, and I know we'll touch on this information technology a bit later, but a media release did occur on June 19th related to the 186 files that were breached during the MOVEit third-party file transfer software we use. And currently we have an internal investigation in regards to those files, as well as externally the RCMP are investigating. Secondly, just around security of our system. So the Duo 2-factor system, we're 95% complete in that regard, and we're quickly progressing on the final 5%. And just in terms, again, referencing back to TransLink and working collaboratively with them, we are working on a shared governance model for with TransLink, as well as a roadmap being created for our IT section as we move forward into the future. So good progressions as well. And already recognized, I'm going to turn over to Inspector Bryce Graham, just in terms of updates in his area, but lots of good work with the CSO program and many moving parts. So over to you.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'll start quickly with recruiting over this period. Obviously extremely busy, but I really want to also thank our communications team. We did kind of a massive overhaul of our website and our application processes. People can contact us and get assistance if they need anything in the recruiting section. We ended up hiring 11 CSOs. We ended up hiring 4 recruits and 2 contracts. So again, a total of 17. Just to put it in context, we usually do about 22 a year. So to do 17 in that short of a period was actually a pretty big move for us. But luckily we had some extra support. So a couple of people, and also the communications team for helping with the website, as well as everybody recruiting to kind of pull it together. For training, we have moved to DEMS. I know that a presentation on DEMS, or Digital Evidence Management System, has occurred here before. We managed to train essentially all our available staff. So basically everybody that's not on like a long-term disability or waiting for another factor. And we've gone live with DEMS. So that's now how we're doing completely all our electronic evidence. In order to do that, we end up having to meet with Crown and get a kind of an MOU signed of how we're going to do it, RTC disclosures. Obviously, for us, a little more difficult than some of the other agencies because we deal with multiple Crowns. We had to sit down with, Zone 2 as well as Zone 3, which is a nice way of saying like basically Vancouver and also Fraser Valley. So that's gone through our information management system as well as also our training. We've conducted all our pistol qualifications as well as some of the training that you've heard already kind of mentioned here today. And on our facility side, we're in the finalization of plans and costing. We're going to be doing some renovations at our waterfront office as well as our Richmond office. That's everything for me.
And that's the chief's report.
Yeah, very good.
So I've got a couple of questions. One was the IT governance discussion. When we last year, I believe, recreated the IT staff that are embedded in the police service back into the police service structure. And at that point in time, it was sounded like there was too much of a disconnect having police IT embedded in BTS with TransLink. And so we brought them over, and now it sounds like we're saying maybe we went too far. We need to sort of re-engage more directly with BTS so that what's going on in the police service and what's going on in TransLink are complementary. Is that a fair statement?
No, I don't think it is. What had happened though is, so it isn't we went too far. The issue is when we did the transfer, there was always meant, and Oscar can jump in, there was always meant to be a service level agreement, a master service agreement as to what would happen. That hasn't happened. We've been waiting for BTS to give the defined roles as to where it is. So as a result of not having the agreement, we're very much still having to go to them for things like for funding or trying to get things, because they retain parts of the budget in their budget, like for capital and expansion. So that's what needs to be clarified, is this service level agreement. So
Yes. Yeah, and you may recall when Kirk Gregor was here, I asked the question about master agreements, see, and he confirmed that those are still going to be put together. We will be sitting down and the functions that they continue to provide for us. So when we moved the staff over in the PowerPoint that was sort of part of the approval process, a couple of very clear slides that said there's still work that needs to happen, clarify some of the roles, make sure that BTS's support and funding and their sort of capital and the horsepower that they have to assist us continues to be something we can leverage, but also keeping in mind our own security and sort of functional issues that we need to deal with as a police agency. So it's still all in the works.
and what I would add is they are still an excellent resource. Like when something happens, they have staff, expertise, resources, and the power of just what they have. So when this happened, this incident, we'll discuss it more later, but when it happened, our staff did all the right things of shutting it down, containing it, updating the patch onto the system. And now we're dealing with the whole, how do we make sure it didn't go too far? What happened? And Kurt, in a discussion, said, it's been out in the media, there was a vulnerability to the whole system worldwide. And at this zero moment, if the company didn't patch it, then the vulnerability existed for everybody. And we were just unfortunate. Even if we were connected to TransLink, they were vulnerable, just weren't one of the organizations that got struck.
So the way that, what I understand, then this is kind of phase 2 of what commenced last year, and we're simply completing the process to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Right.
Right, okay.
So I think it is determining as well the process, if there is an escalated incident like this, how do we engage and what does that process look like, and leverage the knowledge in both organizations.
But just, just a general comment that the cyber world is becoming sort of the world where crime takes place. And it seems like as important as it is to protect ourselves, we need to understand how to react when something happens that appears to be infiltrating our databases. And so I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with what's going on. But it does concern me when significant software like one that was deployed here had this vulnerability. It tells me that they aren't doing their jobs in some respects. And in facto creates a problem for us and for many other companies around the world. So the second question I have, thank you for the response to that, by the way. The capital approval process, you've mentioned that we're engaged in with TransLink, I guess the capital planning committee of TransLink in relation to capital improvements that are required for the transit police service. And in discussions with Gigi this week, she had mentioned that, and I'm saying this respectfully, but the carbine acquisition process or deployment process didn't follow the normal protocols. And I'm raising it, I'm not sure all that was necessary, and it's well after the fact, so little that we can do about that one. But I just wanted to reinforce the fact that the police board, at least me as a director on the police board, is trusting that the processes that need to be followed in relation to capital budgeting and deployment of capital works, whatever they are, is followed correctly, both with respect to our TPS policies as well as with respect to the TSML and TransLink policies. So I raise it only to say that there were concerns about how the carbine element of our capital program was rolled out. So just as a information. And then the third thing that I noted was this the training program that's being implemented with respect to call takers. And I know that we changed our or we added to our responsibilities last year. I think it was last year, where we took on responsibility for non-emergency response calls for the West Vancouver community, their police department directly. And I'm wondering, is what we're doing now in part related to the additional responsibility, or would it have been done anyway, notwithstanding the fact that we took on these additional calls from West Vancouver?
With are you relating
The
to the
training.
staffing or
Yeah,
the
the
training?
training, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I know this is more maybe a question for your ADEX, but I'll speak to it, is, there's a lot happening within that particular industry, and with e-com, there's a lot of different competitive advantages that they're offering to their staff. So, we are seeing, and that is looking at building a succession, plan and training within to hopefully sustain and retain our members within the OCC. Currently, although we have applications, we actually are, putting postings, we're not getting applicants for the position. So, yeah, so it's really trying to create an opportunity to have people within.
So what's the difference between, I guess there were three different categories, call taker, dispatcher, I forget what the third one was, I read it in the report, but how are those differentiated? Because that's what I was wondering.
Just if I can, just on your first question, West Van isn't the cost, us taking on their responsibilities hasn't resulted in what the changes are. The changes that the industry is such that places like Burnaby, New West, Delta, trying to think who else may have pulled back and had started their own non-emergency call centers, which has divided staff, the limited staff, and then e-com has recently settled a contract in it, and which is favorable to the employees, which is drawing people back in. It's a resource for everybody in all the positions that's driving this. And we can, mention some things in camera that we're possibly considering here. But training is, we keep looking to recruit people who are already trained, and we're not doing our own training to build up our own pool of resources, which is why to move towards training it now is, can we not develop our own kind of casual reserve system here as opposed to just posting for current people, which means they've been trained somebody else. We'll have loyalties elsewhere.
So with respect to the three categories, how are they differentiated? Like, what's the difference between a call taker and a dispatcher? And I forget what the third name was, but there was a third element there.
Information operator.
Yeah, that's what it was, yeah.
So a call taker will take the initial call that comes in from the public. When the members are on the road patrolling, and dispatcher will dispatch then the call. But when they need to check on run somebody, they will change the channel and go to the information operator. And then back to dispatch for more information.
So the intention would be that everybody that's a call taker could be a dispatcher or an information handler.
My understanding, the new system will allow for a distinguishment, so you can have someone that's maybe trained in one area, but not all. So it just creates greater flexibility and ability to retain people.
See, the thing that, I guess, I don't have too much time here, but the problem we're facing in many industries, including call taking, is that There doesn't appear to be enough people to fill all the seats. And so any training that we do as a transit police service, in some respects, is helping the pool, but isn't necessarily fenced off to just help ourselves. But I realize that if everybody's doing similar things, maybe collectively the pool is growing, and therefore collectively we're helping ourselves as part of this cooperative. So,
And I want to say there is technology that's coming into play, and Vancouver Police through ECOM are using a system called Amelia, which is to distinguish calls through an automated type system. We don't, because we're not at the point of it, some agencies are using online crime reporting and different things. Most of us is dispatch because it's very personal in movement type of thing. So we're watching, everyone's part of these. What is ECOM doing? What are the innovative steps with technology? How can we address this? And really, it's a labor shortage in this area.
that's so fantastic. But thank you for the information.
May I have a comment? It's not just about recruiting, it's also about retaining. And so they go hand in glove, because if you don't have a healthy workplace or they don't feel valued, I'm not saying, I'm just talking globally, that the retainment is the key once they're hired, and developmental opportunities. And then there is a labor shortage, so everybody's fighting for the same resources. So what makes people stay is the softer skills, and just also the potential advancement. And that's the thing with OCC, there's not a lot of advancement, right? So how do you keep them and still make sure that they're having input and having impact is a big deal.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for all the updates. I've got a question for Royce. Just on recruiting, how are you finding applications for both recruits and experienced officers trending? Like number of applications up, down, about the same, what's your sense of it?
So this year we're doing a little bit better, but I think we overhauled kind of our social media package. We put some money into kind of advertising. In this last quarter, we attended 11 community events, for example. So we're trying to get out there. We're trying to reach different groups. We're trying to target different people. Overall, like applications are down, much like dispatchers. And when we have the conversations with kind of our partners in the jurisdictions, overall applications are down if you look over an extended like 5-10 year period. But it's the same trend that everybody's seeing. But for us, we're really trying to get out there, make it easier for people to contact us. They'll meet with us in a recruiter in person to walk people through, give them experience. We're hosting, a lot of internal job fairs and getting word out about our department.
Thank you.
Great. All right, and thanks very much for the written report. That was really helpful. All right, let's move on to Stephen, safety campaign.
Okay. I think we have a few slides we're going to try to put on the screen. But I'll just start out as we kind of get into this, just saying like during my duration of transit police, even preceding that, we have seen a gradual increase in terms of the amount of messaging up on the system, advertising our tech service. Particularly, I think around 2019, TransLink really made a significant investment in terms of advertisements by the doors of every single SkyTrain. They installed stickers above the yellow strips on every single SkyTrain. Like we're talking somewhere in the range of 8,000 different advertisements that were installed several years ago. And we've also seen a gradual expansion in terms of our seasonal campaigns. So when we look at our anti-sex offense campaign every single summer, consistently every single time we've done a campaign, we've seen TransLink commit additional resources in terms of platform posters, spaces on trains, on buses, at bus stops, what have you. So what we're seeing now for 2023 is just a continuation on a much greater scale, but just a continuation in terms of that overarching increase in terms of messaging you're seeing across the system. The posters on the screen, this actually, these started to go up in late 2022. Thinking was on two fronts. One was Gordon McGinnis, our sergeant in charge of our K9 unit. He had visited other areas across North America, other transit systems like New York. And one of the things he noted when he was riding their trains is that they often advertised their dog teams as an additional layer of reassurance. And so I asked if we could start looking at trying to get some posters up on the system, just showcasing that we do have these dog teams in place. The timing is really good because as we're coming out of the pandemic and as TransLink was seeing greater ridership, we really wanted to ensure that riders who are either returning to the system for the first time after a 2 or 3 year period, or new riders who might be using the transit system for the first time, that they are aware of our tech service and they're aware of various ways to get in contact with us. So these posters started to go up on the SkyTrain system late last year. They are still up. And then heading into 2023, we're seeing a fairly significant expansion of additional ads going up. So on the left-hand side, these are confirmed ads. On the right-hand side, these are some early mock-ups. They're not necessarily final or confirmed at this stage. But the advertisements on the left-hand side, there's actually 5,200 of these going up on the system. I believe they're still being installed this week. They were initially aiming to get these all installed by mid-June, but given the size and scope of this campaign, it has taken a little bit longer to install them across the fleet. But really what we're looking at is 200 ads on SkyTrains. So most SkyTrains, if not all SkyTrains, when you get on a car, you're going to see 1 or 2 of these ads on the upper panel. And on buses with 5,000, when you consider that there's about 200 routes and a couple thousand buses, pretty much every single bus will have 2 articulated buses will have 4 of these ads. So this is a really, really significant campaign just in terms of the number of advertisements going up. In addition to that, what TransLink's looking at is the left-hand side ads. Those are just put up for a duration of time. We're looking at probably the next year and a half, but they're not permanently installed ads. On the right-hand side, what TransLink's looking at is, can they look at permanent deckling on every single window of every single bus and every single train? On SkyTrain, when you look at yellow strips, there is some subtle messaging about the text number, but this would be much more, it'd be a little bit larger, it would be more visible, and it would be on every single transit vehicle across the system. So at the moment, what TransLink is really doing is they've just been testing out different color options really for enhanced visibility, just to make sure that these really stand out and that they also stand the test of time. So something might look really high visibility now, but once it's been up on the system for a number of years, you have to think that you're getting sunlight through the windows, you do get a little bit of fading. So they're kind of considering that, and they really want these ads to be as impactful as possible. What's the different between this campaign and past campaigns is in the past, there's really been a strong focus on the SkyTrain system. And really, this is the first time we're going to see wide scale ads up on the buses. So when we kind of look at the analytics related to our text number, what we're likely to start to see is a shifting of more and more text coming through from the different bus routes across Metro Vancouver. Similar ads on SkyTrain. This is just showcasing that they're at the SkyTrain station on a platform. Right-hand side, these are existing cards that we hand out. They're currently in the process of being refreshed in terms of the design. And what TransLink is looking at supporting us with is actually street teams that would be going out to different stations, bus loops, busy SkyTrain stations, and handing out these cards to passengers over the coming months. So that's currently in the process of being redesigned, and those street teams are being established. And that would complement our own volunteers who'd be out on the system doing the same thing on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, as well as we might look at capitalizing on the TransLink volunteers. So there's a number of different teams in existence, but the reasoning behind actually having established street teams is we want to have those cards distributed 7 days a week and at multiple stations. So we see an increase in staffing for a duration of time. These actually started to go up earlier this week. I saw one at my daughter's bus stop while I was walking into work. So anytime you see a listing of different bus times, so when the bus comes to this stop, you see that square advertisement at the bottom. So this is the first time we're actually going to be utilizing this space to advertise the text number. When you scan the QR code, what it does is actually brings up a contact card in your phone. You can save the contact card, and you instantaneously have the 877777 text number in your phone. So that's fantastic. That's going to lead a lot of individuals, students in particular, as they're waiting for the bus, to save the text number in their phone permanently. And then looking ahead, there's a variety of additional advertising spaces that can be considered. On the left-hand side, these are, I think there's about 44 or 48 of these digital kiosks at different SkyTrain stations. So when an individual is actually standing there trying to wayfind and determine their route, it does display advertisements, and a certain percentage of time on those ads is allocated to transit messaging. So we're going to be looking at capitalizing on some of those as part of this campaign. On the right-hand side, this is a really, really large ad of Carla's. And we're gonna be taking that down and putting up our transit police ad instead. There's also an LCD screens. Yeah, it's all good. It's been up there long enough. There's a variety of other, LCD digital screens. You see those digital screens in the downtown core. So there's a lot of digital assets that are being considered as part of this campaign. And we're really looking at the full scope of all the different spaces across the system for the next 18 months. It doesn't necessarily mean that all the ads will be on every single space for that 18 months. It will adjust over time because there is other messaging transit has to get out. But in particular, those permanent ads, those are going to be in place forever. It's going to be part of the overarching design of buses and trains moving forward. And the majority of these ads will be up for a minimum of 18 months. It may even be longer. What we often find is you allocate an advertisement for 18 months, but at the end of that period, it's not necessarily someone's on the bus right away pulling down the advertisement. And if someone else hasn't purchased that space yet, sometimes you end up having the ad on the system much longer. So much larger campaign than what we've ever seen before. And it'll be interesting to kind of see how that adjusts in terms of the number of texts we're getting on the bus network in particular. That's about it. Any questions in the group?
I love seeing those QR codes. And I'm just wondering about, the prevalence and how, as opposed to the rack cards, the paper cards, the way that we're changing how we store our contact information. We're noticing people are not printing business cards or using cards for the environmental cost, for the activity that have to go in hand of these cards, and people aren't taking them, or they end up being recycled. So the digital opportunities for people to collect and download, have their contacts in their phone or wherever would be the focus, right? And maybe moving away from those handing out cards over time. It strikes me that that's we're noticing we've been printing out rack cards. They don't move anymore. People don't pick them up. So I mean, even if you're handing them out, just for the sheer environmental cost alone, be moving away from that.
I think part of it has to do though with the fact that transit serves a wide demographic. So like students, young adults, they're more likely to probably scan the QR code. But then on our Chiefs Community Council, we do have groups like Tri-City Seniors who still say, oh, we still want the card. So we might reduce the quantity, but we still want to make sure we have some printed material to give to some of those individuals as well.
For sure. But the prevalence of those QR codes, they're going to be everywhere now. It's sort of the
totally every bus stop where you see those.
That's very exciting.
Those numbers, it's going to have that QR code underneath.
Yeah, it's such a way to go.
It's like 8,800 bus stops.
Wow, it's fantastic. It's great.
Just a question going forward in terms of kind of measurement. I assume that TransLink will do its regular survey of riders and so on, and hopeful that perhaps there can be a question related to the effectiveness of some of these things to see if people actually have seen them, if they download it. I think there's a real opportunity here for us with transit police. This is a jumping forward point where there's a recognition by TransLink that there was an issue there. It's evolution, as we always talk about, of transit police and our branding. So I think we need to keep the momentum going, and anything we can get in the way of information to showcase and support our continued need of that space and advertising for years to come. So maybe really important. This was kind of a one-off, let's push this thing, and then it goes back to what it was.
Right. Over the years, I found that the TransLink marketing team has been extremely supportive of us. And although this is the largest campaign we've seen in the past, as I've said, every time we've kind of gone to them and said we want to do a campaign, they've always seemed to come to us with more on the table and saying, okay, have you considered A, B, C, D, and E? Here's some new options on the table you might not have thought of. So the bus stops, I hadn't even proposed. I had more asked about the horizontal spaces and the digital screens. And TransLink were the ones who came to the table and said, oh, if you consider this space, if you consider this space, so. I think the permanent deck link is one thing, like that's fantastic. If, we're gonna know there's a minimum amount of messaging on every single vehicle. But also ensuring that we still have that seasonal campaign. So when we look at the next iteration of the anti-sex offense campaign that we constantly have, I think at least every 2 years, we have a bit of a refresh campaign out of the system.
Yeah, so firstly, great visibility. I tried the QR code there while you were chatting. It took me about 10 seconds, so it's awesome, right? I just curious if you thought about the impacts on staffing and volumes, like, if this is so visible, what's going to happen internally here with our teams when people are starting to text and starting to reach out? Have we forecasted out what volume might look like as a result of this campaign?
Yeah, we weren't entirely sure what kind of uptake we would see. We're monitoring on a daily basis. So first of all, every single morning I get a report about the number of texts that come through. And then on a weekly basis, we do a bit of a deep dive. We're also conveying that to TransLink. We haven't seen a significant increase as of yet, but as I say, we're monitoring it every 24 hours because more and more ads are going up on the system. And even a couple of months ago, when we were just trying to consider this campaign, there were meetings with Carolyn and the OCC to just discuss, okay, if we go from 30 texts a day to 60 texts a day, what would that look like in terms of manpower in the OCC, like just having maybe one additional body, just strictly focusing on the text service. So we do have plans in place. We haven't necessarily put those additional personnel in right away. And I think that was probably smart thinking because we haven't seen that really dramatic increase as of yet, but that could change very quickly.
And just on that, so the TransLink board has asked the same questions yesterday. The interesting part is the majority of our texts come from people using SkyTrain, which is about where 65 to 70% of all transit riders are on the bus. So and of course, geographically, the buses present a bit of a challenge, just because they're spread over 1,800 square kilometers. But we've also advised, say, like transit security is aware of this, right? So the resource or the result of the text may not require a police officer necessarily, but that we want to make sure that everyone's going to be responded to. So whether it be the station attendants, Canada Line attendants, transit security, ourselves, our jurisdictional police partners, we'll be watching for that to see what's happening. In the event of anything serious, the goal is to get the closest, police unit, which could be jurisdictional, especially on the buses, to the scene. And then part of our steps is if they want us to come and assume control of it, we will, or if they're going to keep the file, it's up to them. But we do have and are very conscious of this to make sure that anyone using it has a good experience and proper response.
I noticed you had that in the police, in the performance statistics around 2,541 text reports resulted in a police file. Do you know what proportion, how many texts you get versus how many ultimately end up in a police file? Or
Yeah, I think it was around 4,500 texts were received. So it's somewhere in the range of, I think, about 60%.
it'd be interesting. You'll watch that trend in terms of what happens.
Yeah, Pat Coe in particular, I know keeps
Yeah.
a very close track of it. It's part
Yeah.
of our regular monthly review in terms of analytics.
Yeah.
So it has adjusted over time. During COVID, we were getting a lot of texts, but just about masks. And it was interesting because at certain points of time, we could respond and it might create a file because it was enforceable. And then at other times, because health orders were changing, there wasn't really any action to be taken. So that also adjusts the percentage in terms of what you can respond to and what you're lawfully able to do in that instance.
And also, it's funny, that when we talk about resources, we're also talking about whether it's civilian resources or replace some police personnel in there who can address the call without having to dispatch somebody. So, a lot of credit to Dex and Suzanne and Anita, who have, working with the comm center, working with resources, and with Stephen and Pat watching the analytics of it. And that is like, where are they coming from? What's the location? Are we suddenly shifting? And then who do we meet with in terms of partners to make sure that this increases? So,
And those staffing projection models are in place. Should we see the increases? Yeah.
Great, good. Any other comments, questions? Let's move on to other business, report from the finance committee.
Thank you. So in the consent agenda, you saw the Q1 financial operating status report for 2023. And kind of a good news report. It's projecting well, for the Q1 period, it was outlining that there was a $510,000 saving in comparison to budget. That $510,000 primarily relates to savings that accrued as a result of the CSO program not rolling out as quickly as the original budget had anticipated. But it also shows us at the end of the report that $510,000 saving will be maintained through to the end of the year. So there are some items that are slightly up and some items that are slightly down, but the salaries element primarily related to CSOs is the principal saving right now. And the priorities that are identified, the key priorities for 2023 include the rollout of the digital evidence management solution, the community safety officer program, the crisis discussed, increasing civilian support staff, frontline officers, and the CSOs, and then a higher level of focus on Indigenous relations, improving that area within the context of the mandate of the Transit Police Service. So it looks like at this point in time, everything is positive. The variances are positive, and I'll have an additional report in camera regarding other matters.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Murray? Okay, good. Over to you, George, for governance.
Sure, thank you, Maureen. The consent agenda had the information of several different items that were discussed. So everybody's had a chance to look at that. It's available in the package. The one thing that is before us at the moment is 3.2, which was a recommendation in and around the Finance Committee's original policy request covering the existing policy of funding, donation, endorsement, gifts, and so on. This is tied back to, I guess, the evolution. I may look to the chief on this one, kind of the evolution of the organization, in which we've always had volunteers. There's been all sorts of different initiatives and so on. This was to kind of clarify how the funding would work for requests coming in, and it's been basically endorsed by the governance committee and brought to the board today just for more information than anything else, as opposed to real action. Just to reinforce the fact that TransLink is really the funder, and if there are organizations that wish to seek some of the funding, that's probably the route to go, but it does rest with the chief, who usually gets the request. So there were some things there that have happened over the last 2 or 3 years that has now led us to this point to kind of reestablish the policy and clarify.
Yeah, just to clarify, what'll happen, whether it be by advertisements or programs, some people will approach us saying, well, you'd make a donation or support this program. And where we're involved, or like our volunteers are involved, or we're connected with our programming, it's, a budget decision of the chief. We've got funding such as, Stephen's section, and that is what we can do. But on some occasions, we would get requests from groups just to fund them outside of us and saying, can you give us funding? And we'll say, we're part of you, or, you support us. And as we evolve to create our own volunteer programs, and that we look to stop some of these outside funding requests so that we could invest the money internally on light programs that supported it in the same way. So in other words, we didn't stop supporting the program, but we needed to shift it. And of course, some ask questions. Well, if I'm still looking for funding, how should I do that? And we wanted to make it clear to those groups that you should really, if we're saying no because it's not part of us, we've got something complementary that we're already doing, you can still make a request of TransLink because they have a community group thing. And we can even write in support of you getting that funding or and endorse you for it, but was to try and get away from us. We view it that we're being given money to operate the police agency and not necessarily be purchasing advertisements and stuff like that. So
the item through the chair is really just to receive this for information, and just to make sure it goes to it.
George? Any questions for George? All right. Next item up is vice chair. So we have been running the vice chair for a while. So Carla has graciously Graciously.
I just.
Volunteer.
I just keep saying that.
I just voluntarily said she's.
This is just what, this is what happens when you spend 10 minutes in the elevator in the morning. I need in the minutes and hardly an agenda, I'm like, I thought I was gonna do a session where I could nominate George. So anyways.
Volunteer dues.
Too late.
Once you put it in there, it's like,
It's done now, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, so I do appreciate that. Thank you, Carson.
So moved.
1 year.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. We got a good board. It's a diverse board in a variety of experience and what everybody brings to the table. I think we're really lucky. I know how hard it is for organizations to have committed board members. And I think with Carla going into this, the nice part about it is she was on the New Westminster Police Board, and so she brings a level of experience that is going to be significant to our board as well. And it's not, again, just maybe we kid about volunteering and so on, but I just think it's really important for all of us to appreciate the time and effort that goes into it, but everybody contributes, and we've got a great board.
I do appreciate it. Thank you. So the recommendation is that we appoint Carla as vice chair of the police board for a 1-year term effective June 23rd, 2023. All in favor? Good, good. Thank you, Carla. All right. That's right. You will have to have your picture taken now. All right, so next item is the BCAPB conference, and Bill and Murray attended, so we wanted to get some feedback on how that went. Starting, you want to start, Bill?
You want me to start?
Sure.
Thank you. So I had a great opportunity to attend the conference in Nelson. The two key highlights, certainly on governance and also diversity, equity, and inclusion were the hot subjects. I think my personal takeaway is that every board are on the curve, I call it the maturity curve on whether it's on governance and operations or on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Certainly based on my personal experience, my assessment, I have to say that at this point, I believe that we're certainly on the above average side. There's other boards that are still starting on that journey, and there are other boards that are well mature in that journey. And the takeaway for us is to learn from those boards that are further along the journey, but we're making good progress, and I certainly found that was a helpful event. Certainly we had the Minister Mike Farnworth joining us, and we have the Solicitor General, Attorney General Nikki Sharman also joined, so some there's people that certainly showing interest in these. Maybe and Murray, can add it?
No, I think that's a good report. The annual general meeting was held at the conclusion of the conference, and there were a couple of motions that were put forward and approved. One related to e-com. I guess trying to continue to stoke the fire to keep e-com active in improvements. I'm looking at George here because I know that you're doing the same thing as a director on the e-com board. The intention is to have e-com stay focused and as quickly as possible improve the non-emergency response element of their call taking service, which has been, in the context of the Lower Mainland, not meeting the datum against which they're measuring their success. So things like Amelia that are being, it's rolled out now in Vancouver. I haven't heard reports back, but I understand that it's doing a better job. So that's good, and it probably will end up, if Vancouver's happy, probably end up being more ubiquitously applied across the province in the independent or the call centers. And the second motion was related to the Justice Institute, relating to, I guess what I call the 3 C's of the Justice Institute, the cost, which has gone up quite radically over the course of the last year and a half or so. The capacity of the Justice Institute to actually provide training for the cadets that are going through toward becoming constables. And in the curriculum right now, although they're providing training, it's not complete training, and most of the departments are providing additional training when the cadets come back from the academy in order to make them ready be on the street. And so the motion that was carried by at the AGM was that the president of the BCAPB, along with the chair of the BC Association of Municipal Chiefs of Police, provincial officials, and the board of the JI need to discuss the current problems with a view to rectifying them during 2023. And I think the problems that I've seen when I've seen the BCAPB or the BC Justice Institute, the Police Academy make presentations, is that there doesn't seem to be an urgency. There's I think a little bit of lethargy there around making changes. And when I was at the Community Safety Committee of the UBCM recently, they were expected to make a presentation at that committee. And in fact, what it was a question and answer period where they didn't make a presentation. They just simply responded to questions from the directors on the Community Safety Committee, which are people like Gil Hodges, is it from Coquitlam, is the chair. There's a fellow from Fort St. John and a lady counselor from Lang, I forgot her name. But the three of them were there basically asking questions. But I didn't get a sense that there was a real urgency on the part of the Justice Institute, the Police Academy, to make changes quickly. And I think based on my conversations with Dave and with Adam and with other chiefs, I don't think the message is clearly being communicated to the Justice Institute that the current state of being isn't adequate. It needs to be addressed quickly so that we continue to staff our police services across the province with well-trained constables who are ready to hit the street when they're finished the training at the JI. So hopefully those two motions will have some effect. And in each case, both with respect to ECOM and with respect to the JI, the province is part of the group that's been identified to address the concerns that have been raised by the independent police services. Was there anything I missed, Dave? Like you were there?
Yeah, no, you touched on it. I think the JI is just like this lack of urgency, lack of response, and it's give you an example. I think, Bryce, what we say that there was like 96 requests for 64 seats in the next coming police academy class, and it doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have the funding, so it isn't structurally set up to take on something. You got to do 300 or 400 recruits. So it needs it. And by the way, there's been about 6 reports, so there's no need. If someone comes to you and recommends we do another study, you can brush off anyone you want, and that it's time for a significant change. And it probably has to be tied into, as the government of the day seems to be looking at police modernization and a path forward, whether it's provincial policing forces or regional, but it's really need that infrastructure. And the other one is just cost control. I think we've heard some estimates of costs rising and significantly, and those are being borne by the local, agencies that submit their, put members in there to be trained, right? With very little say as to what is the training and what is the requirements that they would like to see delivered while they're there.
I think sort of building on this, there's been many reports prepared about the current state of being of the police academy, and they've been implemented to some extent or other, not holistically. And I think the context is really one of looking at the total budget for the police academy, which I understand something over 10 million a year, plus or minus.
So they're projecting.
And I think the province is funding it to the extent of about 2 million a year. So they throw in about 20% of the funding, plus or minus.
A little less.
And yet the province is responsible for police standards, so have a significant stake in how training is conducted to ensure that the police standards of the province are in fact recognized in the training, holistically recognized. But the problem that we're facing as a police service, and again, I defer to Dave on this, but the cadets are coming out trained sort of 80% or 85% of the way to being a fully trained constable, but 15% of the training occurs in a 6 or 8 week period after the training at the JI is completed, so that they can be effective when they hit the streets as a transit police constable. So it's something that, from my perspective, if it isn't addressed now, when is it going to be addressed? And I think this lethargy that we've experienced I said to someone at the conference, I know the board of the e-com system, but I don't know anybody on the board other than the president and CEO of the police academy with respect to the JI. So I think that's sort of a fundamental problem right there when you don't even know the board. So it's something that I'm hoping that when this motion is translated into a letter, proper people invited and a meeting is convened, that the meeting will bear fruit quickly. And even though the costs are shared between constables that are being trained and the departments that are funding them, looking to bring them on, regardless of who's paying the costs, there should be an accountability around the money that's being spent. And I think right now that accountability isn't there.
So two things. One is, I believe it was Ontario. We talked about this a couple months ago. They made the announcement that they were going to
Waive tuition.
waive tuition. And so there's precedent in Canada for this, given the, so hopefully the BC Association is going to be able to draw on that. Second really is more of a question to Bill and Murray. Funding's been an issue for you folks at the Association of Police Boards. Was any of that discussed? I know you've got a new president or chair, which is Adam from your police board.
Tricia Barnes.
Who I think will be a real positive in trying to get some stuff done. But there's been a fundamental issue around funding, and I don't know whether that was discussed or if there is something that we as a group of police boards really need to address this coming year about how do you do it to be able to advance these issues in a timely manner. And just one comment is related to that e-com letter that started back in September of last year and only now got kind of sent. And like 6 months has gone by and a whole bunch of stuff has changed, including mayors, council members, and so on. Plus, there's been advancements in this, and it rings kind of hollow by the time it arrives at the desk of the minister again. So that's probably timing and resources, but I don't know whether you folks were able to address that.
Well, I think the context for funding and resourcing, I've mentioned before, board meetings, that the BCAPB doesn't have very much funding. It collects about $15,000 annually as membership fees from the independent boards in the province. So $15,000 doesn't do much beyond kind of keep the lights on, so to speak. But a request has been made of the province for funding, both one-time funding of $50,000 to develop a strategic plan for the association to address both what we do and what we don't do. Probably more importantly, what we don't do as opposed to what we do. And the second request was for $150,000 a year operating funding grant that would go on in perpetuity to support resourcing the association so that there are people available to do research and follow up and prepare drafts of the letters and reports that come to the board for consideration at board meetings. And acting deputy minister, assistant deputy minister Glenn Lewis was at the conference and was very approachable. He's like from my perspective, appeared to be favorably disposed to providing funding. And the context of the request was that the province came up with carrot for Surrey to stay on the track that they're on with respect to the independent police force being introduced as the police of jurisdiction in Surrey, $30 million a year for 5 years. I said, gee, our $150,000 is kind of a rounding error when it comes to that kind of funding that I don't think was identified in the provincial budget at the start of the year, but all of a sudden appeared when it was convenient, maybe conducive for the province to encourage a direction. So I said, from my perspective, the $150,000 we're asking for as an association, in light of the fact that most of the work that the association is involved in doing emanates from requests that the police services branch directs to the association. And he seemed to receive that well. So we're hopeful that our requests will fall on favorable ears at the Treasury Board, and we will in fact get funding from the province that will allow us to enhance significantly our capabilities to address emerging issues in police standards and procedures.
I know our board, I certainly do appreciate the work you do as our representative when Bill and Randy went, but I mean, that's an ongoing push, I think, for the professionalism of the boards themselves and being able to get stuff done. And your voice is obviously heard, so that's great.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Marie, for attending and letting us know what happened. All right, that brings us to the end of regular meeting.
Just do one quick, and I'll say it, and then Stephen has it. So just because it's in the open here, so a lot of, we talk about support and member wellness and supporting people. So one of the individuals who works for us, Amanda Manzardo, she's one of our civilian employees here, and she's a member and part of the Special Olympics team, the national team. So she was competing in Berlin, and Stephen has just pointed out here that their team was won a bronze medal back there, and so it's a big deal for her. Perhaps get her to come in and show the medal. She's a very proud employee, comes around, talks to us, draws, she's quite an artist, draws lots of pictures and takes some, whether of the police dogs and everyone there, but this is her third time going, and she's very enthusiastic when it comes to the sport. So I would just like to know there.
Yeah, no, that's
There you go.
great. Great way to end.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. We'll call the open